Okay, well, welcome to whoever it is that is opening up this bit of training. It's around making use of the vision for community wellbeing that Kerry PPN has drawn up, and specifically around using the digest, which was developed to support the representatives sitting on whatever bodies they're on. So my name's Harriet. I'm going to go through this presentation reasonably rapidly. Obviously, it's not interactive, so you might want to dip in and out if it gets a bit heavy at times. So what are we trying to do here today? We're about trying to look at the ways that we use this vision, this important document that the members have agreed around what community wellbeing should look like in Kerry to support the reps, okay? And we're going to do this by looking at where the visions fit into the overall PPN itself, okay, the role of the PPN rep very briefly, and then a reminder of the visions and how they were created before focusing on the practical application of the visions, obviously, and the digest itself, and what else we can do to achieve the PPN members' visions. Okay, so this is my favorite way of thinking about the PPNs. The public participation networks are these groupings, this network of many, in your case, hundreds of different community and voluntary groups, okay? Now that's made up of 3 colleges, but if you think of the top of my 3-legged stool there as being the PPN and all of those hundreds of members taking their own part in this network, okay? Then the PPN itself has 3 core functions. It's around information, going to and from all of those member groups. It's about building the capacity, the strength, and the successful performance of those groups. And it's about participation and representation. And that's really where the vision comes in. That yellow band, which I always like to think of as tying together the members, is my way of showing you the vision, this idea of a wellbeing statement that sets out what the PPN member groups want their particular area or municipal district within Kerry to be like. If everything was nailed perfect, we had it exactly the way we wanted it to be, then their visions are setting out what that is. And it's been agreed together as a consensus document. So it underpins the operation of the public participation network. And that'll give you an idea just how important it is. You can see it's like that strengthening band holding the network together. It means that representatives, when they're sitting on committees, know what it is that they're arguing for on behalf of all of the member groups. And it means that all of those member groups also know what their reps are actually saying on their behalf. Okay, it's like the guidance that's given, and it's also the reassurance to the wider membership. Okay, it gives general direction to the work that the PPN does. So when the PPN develops its strategic plan and then its annual work plans, those will all be informed by the community wellbeing vision. So why do we have a vision? Well, very importantly, it's around that common goal. If you think about all of the hundreds of member groups that you have within Kerry PPN, they're incredibly diverse with lots of different interests. They're divided into 3 colleges: environmental, social inclusion, community and voluntary, and the range of interests is just vast. So bringing that together as a network that hangs together and has some sort of shared identity, the vision is really important because it gives everyone a shared sense of purpose. It's one of the most important things that everyone has actually got together and collaborated on to come up with a shared view. So it's a very important fundamental document. It's completely developed by the PPN members themselves. Nobody came up with a first draft. It was entirely authored and generated by them. And as we've said, it informs the reps and it gives a reassurance to the member groups. It's also the basis for the strategic and annual work plans. And it's a useful measure of change and progress. So periodically you dip in maybe every 5 to 7 years and review your vision. Probably won't need a huge amount of tweaking, but what you'll be able to see is, well, maybe this issue is slightly less important now because we have made progress in achieving what we were looking for. And it supports the democratic process. In other words, it's gone out and communicated with all of these voices in the community, and it's a way of representing those and having them fed in through the reps who are so critical into the democratic process at the local authority level and indeed in other agencies. So thinking about the role of these really important PPN Reps. You can see here that as if you were looking at the top of my stool, you've got those 3 different colleges, and you've got the secretariat and the staff who are there to support the functioning of the PPN. And then you've got around it all the different structures that the PPN has representatives on. So it could be strategic policy committees, it could be the local community development committee, or LCDC as it's often known, it could be the joint policing committee, all sorts of things. But reps are represented by these red lines, and they are really critical because they are the link between the PPN and those bodies that there is PPN representation on. So they're really very, very important. And it's important that they're not left out on their own trying to do this job of communicating the PPN's viewpoint and feeding that back. Okay, so these reps have a number of resources, and critical amongst those is the vision for community wellbeing, because that is, if you like, that's where the buck stops. That's the top of the heap in terms of what all the membership have agreed they want to see ultimately achieved. You've also agreed in Kerry to support the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and any other policies that you have. Those are the sort of references in terms of the positions that the reps would be talking about. The PPN in Kerry also has a representatives charter, which sets out, if you like, the rights and responsibilities for reps, what they can expect and how they should, if you like, be treated, and what they need to do in fulfilling their role. There's also training provided for reps, and this is part of that. And there are briefing materials and induction information supplied by the committees that the reps are sitting on. So just thinking about that a little bit more, here you've got your very happy rep who is going to fulfill this very important role. And I've tried there to show that they have, if you like, a role inside the PPN and a role in whatever committee they're sitting on, the external body. Okay, they've got some guidance, they've got some training, and they'll have either linkage groups or thematic networks or other ways of communicating with PPN member groups about issues that relate to the committee they're sitting on. And so there you've got the inside the PPN itself and the body, the committee, whatever it is that they're sitting on. And really what I'm trying to get across here is that it is really vital, the PPN's role, to feed from the PPN membership as a whole onto that committee or whatever structure it is they're sitting on. But it is equally vital that they feed back. And it is really critical, this information return, because that information return will also inform about, you know, how a vision is reviewed, whether actions need to be taken in order to advance the vision that the membership have agreed, and that might then influence the work plan and so on. And certainly it'll influence the views of the membership. So it's a really critical role and very important. As a rep, it's very important also to stress that your role is to represent the membership. And yes, that might be the whole diversity of it, but it's not to represent yourself or your own individual member group. It's the entire membership. Now, often you'll be there as a rep for the environmental college or maybe for the community voluntary college, but sometimes you might be the only rep sitting in the room, at which point you're actually there to represent everybody in the PPN. So I can't stress enough how important it is, the role of the PPNs. So this vision for community wellbeing, just a reminder really, I suspect many of you know about this and are familiar with it. I think it's accessible on your website, but this is really something that is fundamental to our communities, you know, whether we are thriving, if you like, within our communities. Oftentimes we think about well-being pretty much in a narrower context of mental and physical well-being and health, but actually there's a lot of other conditions that have an impact on our quality of life. You know, how clean and healthy our environment is, whether we have work, all of those sorts of things. And the headings, the 6 headings that you can see around the model there for community and well-being, mean that if we think about all of them, we'll have touched on all of the different aspects of community well-being. Okay, that enable us to thrive and to be well as a community. And it'll also help us to identify the actions that we can take, and we can be looking for our local government and other agencies to take on our behalf in order to deliver this community well-being that the community is setting out in the vision. Okay, so everybody has a role to play here. It isn't that the PPN has masses of funds or masses of personnel in order to deliver things, but we as member groups and the agencies that we deal with and that we have representatives sitting on are all working together towards the well-being of our community. So the more we share and the more we can build in the right direction, the better we'll achieve it. Okay, so how was this vision in Kerry created? Very briefly, there were a number of steps, and these were gone through for each of the 5 municipal districts within Kerry itself. And they involved the holding of workshops in every municipal district, at which there was an exercise done about asset mapping, where everyone present sat down and actually recorded all of the things that are really valuable within their municipal district. And a lot of those are services or facilities provided by community groups through voluntary effort, very important, and things that we wanted to build on. And then from that, everybody was asked to develop their well-being vision, looking across those 6 headings in that model diagram that you've just seen, thinking about what do we want here? What are we trying to achieve? And when those were brought together, they were put out to consultation so that anyone who wasn't able to get to a workshop could be involved. And when that all came back together, they were drafted into vision statements for each of the municipal districts. And again, those went back out to all the member groups to be edited, amended where necessary. And finally, this went forward to the plenary for approval. So just as an example, for each of the municipal districts, so Kerry has 5 of these, there's a vision. And in that vision, there's an overall statement about what community well-being would look like if it's achieved in that municipal district. Okay, so that might be in Killarney or it might be in Listowel. And then there'll be a vision under each of the headings. So you can see there environment and sustainability, health, values, community, culture and meaning, and so on. And within each of that, within the municipal district, there'll be a vision text. And then where there are particularly strong themes coming through, these might be highlighted underneath that. Okay, and then if you take all 5 of the municipal districts, there's an overarching county-wide vision statement that sits on top of that. Okay, now you can imagine that that's quite a lot of material, and one of the reasons to support reps, if you like, trying to navigate this and do it efficiently and not take up loads of their time, was to produce a digest of all of these visions. Okay, and that's really what we're going to move on to look at now. Okay, so if you want to be able to use your vision, you need to know it. And actually, there isn't a shortcut around that. So there are these 5 separate municipal district visions with that overarching county vision. But very often committees aren't working at a municipal district level. They're working at a county level, or they're focused on a particular issue. And to make it easier to navigate for reps when they're working at a committee level, then well, you do need to know your visions, but you also have this digest. And that is a really useful tool to short circuit you having to check every municipal district's digest on a particular issue. So let's look at that document. Okay, if you have it in front of you, you'll find that it sets out on the very first page the format. So it explains, and if you're ever wondering how it works, it is worth reading through that rather than flicking straight through. If you're like me and you're not good at the instructions page, the chances are you'll flick straight forward into the document itself. But it is quite useful. It also explains the community well-being model, the importance of thinking about well-being as a community, not just as individuals. And it talks around the overall county vision and presents an index. It does also include each of the 5 municipal district visions towards the end of the document. So if you want to look just for, let's say, Castle Island, you could look at that vision alone. But the main part of the digest itself actually looks at all of the 5 vision statements combined together, and it does it heading by heading. So for example, mental and physical health, it might look at environment and sustainability, it might look at work economy and resources. Okay, so this is just to illustrate that. If you were looking at the digest document, I think this is on page 7 or page 8, this is thinking about the environment and sustainability heading. Okay, so each of the visions for each municipal district has a section on the environment and sustainability. And what the digest has done is pull out the bits that are common or shared across all of those municipal districts to inform you as a rep. So if I'm a rep sitting into a committee and I want to see what the environment perspective was, I can see that actually across all 5 municipal districts, there was agreement on that quote that's there in the green box. We are all conscious of our environment and work to ensure that it is protected. And then you'll see there's a key, and it lists underneath that all of the issues or keywords that come up underneath all of the 5 different municipal district visions, underneath this heading of environment and sustainability. And they're set out alphabetically, so you can see them there. They begin with access, best practice, and there's 3 columns of those as they work through. So it summarizes the information from all of the 5 different municipal district visions into one. So I can look at environment and sustainability here for all of the 5 municipal districts. Further down underneath that list of keywords, you'll find that where there are strong issues that are particularly addressed underneath each heading within the vision, these have been pulled out. So this example shows you the page that relates underneath the social and community development heading. And it says, well, in all 5 of the municipal districts, 2 themes come up very strongly: facilities and services and recreation and sport. And it sets out a key to all of the different places that you can find reference to facilities and services in the municipal district visions themselves. So for example, C is Castle Island, Corcardou, as it says in the key above, and then you've got KE for Kenmare, KI for Killarney, L for Listowel, and T for Tralee. And it gives you also a whole section of related words that are used in conjunction with facilities and services. So it's giving you an idea of what you can search for, what might be being discussed in terms of facilities and services. For example, education, childcare, older citizens, youth, and so on. And equally, recreation and sport came up in all 5 municipal districts. And you can see there in the faded out letters and numbers where they come up under those 5 municipal districts. And then underneath that, it'll tell you all of the issues that came up in 4 municipal districts, in 3 municipal districts, in 2, and then those that come up just in the 1. And finally, under each heading, there you go, you can see this is actually under public participation, good governance and democracy. You can see it says in 2 municipal districts, a safe place was an important point that was brought out, and it explains that might have been in relation to traffic and the presence of Gardaí, or it might have been around just having a safe community in general. And in 1 municipal district, enterprise came up, and in another, rural proofing. But down here in the bottom, you also have a number of coloured boxes, and those relate to the sustainable development goals that the PPN has signed up to. Okay, those are the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and these are the goals that specifically relate to this heading. Okay, and again, this is useful because it backs you up. These are things that in general our local authorities have signed up to too, so they support what you are making the case for using material under this heading. Okay, so how do you use this vision and the digest to inform your work as a rep? Okay, and we're just going to work through a couple of examples to illustrate this. Okay, so in the first instance, I've said you need to be basically familiar with the visions, what's common to all of them, are there any particular differences to note? And there are some. So you should have had a read through. The more you reference this information, the more familiar it becomes. You need to consider it by municipal district, because that'll tell you where the differences are. For example, where employment is really critical, where tourism might be particularly important, and so on. And then you can also think about it in relation to themes, okay? And that's very much helped by the digest. And different sectors within the community. So you might be considering aspects that relate to people with disabilities, or particular issues that relate to committees that you sit on, things like housing and healthcare. So you can search and use this information in a variety of ways with a variety of different focus. So it could be about, as I say, the municipal district, it could be about something to do with, new communities, or it could be something around transport. And remember that there are two ways for you to use this information. It can inform what you say and what you bring to the committees that you're sitting on in response to something that's on their agenda already. But equally, you can actually set the agenda by asking for issues that are important and coming up in the vision and the different municipal district visions, asking to have that discussed at a committee session too. So let's take a particular example that might come up on a committee that a PPN rep is sitting on. Right? This might be on a housing SPC, and it might be considering improvements in council housing estates and maybe regeneration in certain areas. So that's the issue that's coming up on the agenda. And you as the rep need to find out what PPN member views are on housing and maybe on regeneration, if that's mentioned specifically. So how do you use the vision? What do you look for and where? So using that example around improvements in council housing, I'm just going to work through with you how I would use this initially. I'd focus, let's say, first on work economy and resources, just taking one heading. I'd work through all 6 of them actually, but let's start with work economy and resources. What does the vision say under that heading? And I'd search firstly for things that are of direct relevance. So I'd be looking for things that relate to the keyword of housing, and perhaps regeneration, which may feature less, but equally should be searched for. And when I did that, I found 3 things that specifically spoke to housing. The first one at the top there in the yellow box comes from the Castle Island Municipal District, and it's in its main vision text. And it says that it's looking for a range of local housing, okay? And interestingly, it goes on, and facilities to make this an attractive place to live and work. So that would very much relate to the regeneration aspect. There's also something there from Listowel about this housing being part of an infrastructure which supports daily life, recreation, and business. So there's this idea that it's part of a comprehensive, but also, integrated network, and it supports lots of different aspects of our lives. And equally, you've got again from Listowel under one of the specific points there, it's integrated provision of all of that infrastructure, okay, supporting enterprise, commercial activities, workers, and the wider community. So those are direct references within the vision that would inform what I would say as a rep looking at this heading, at this topic. And then there are a range of ones that are slightly less immediately relevant, but also useful, okay? So you've got references here, for example, thinking about the Killarney 6 one on the right-hand side of the screen, we have wonderful, well-maintained and managed public spaces accessible for all to enjoy. Well, if you're thinking about council housing, this is a public housing estate, and it having open spaces and being an attractive and well-managed space for people to enjoy. That says something about how it's designed, how it's laid out, what sort of facilities might be there, even if it's just seating or having green areas and space and so on. So these all inform the way that you might feed in to the discussion around improvements in council housing and regeneration. Okay, and that's how you'd search the vision using the digest for these particular issues. Okay, if you asked yourself, well, taking the same thing again, how does it relate to the social and community development heading? And you'd look at that set of pages in the digest, and again you'd be looking for direct and indirect relevance. Okay, having worked through this example, what comes up very specifically here are a number of points contained within the vision. So these are things that people want to see achieved. So they want the local population supported by proactive planning, housing and settlement policies, particularly in rural areas. Okay, and then in the Killarney Municipal District, it's an integrated approach to good development and planning and design. Okay, and then it goes on and says it's about attractive and accessible housing and the infrastructure and facilities to meet community needs. So that would be telling me as a rep that I need to bear in mind provision for housing in rural areas, that I need to think about good design and integrating the sorts of other infrastructure and facilities that community needs around houses. Okay, this is the sort of information that you're gathering that all of your members have combined to give you. Okay, and it goes on again, and there's further information coming there from Listowel and then from Tralee, so that all residents live in suitable and appropriate homes. In other words, there has to be something there around tailoring the housing stock to the needs of the community, whether that's older people, people who have mobility issues, people who are, living in different areas and maybe don't want to have to move considerable distances to access housing. And again, you've got the point at the top there around the needs of older citizens. Now, that's not necessarily specific just to housing, but if this is an age-friendly community, then housing needs to also address the concerns of older citizens. Okay, and the blue text is where we've moved on to thinking about the mental and physical health heading. Okay, so this is about a variety. So that's a critical word. There's a range. It's not all standard. It's not, one size fits all. It's affordable, another key word in there, and it meets the needs of different groups within the community. Okay, with supports provided for safe and independent living. So these are all aspects of thinking about housing that you would be able to bring on behalf of the community to a discussion at a committee looking at this issue. Okay, so there is a huge amount of material in the vision, and the digest is the way to access that as quickly and efficiently as possible. Okay, so we can look at another example here that might come up in relation to housing and planning SPC. You might have some vacant council property in the town centre, and that committee might be thinking about, well, what is the council going to consider doing there? And you could think about all the very different approaches you might have to discussing that. And you might need to look across lots and lots of different headings, because this type of open space might be suitable for all sorts of things. And you need to think about, well, across the board, what do communities want? Now, if you're talking about a particular area, in this case, you might go to specifically the vision document for that municipal district. But there are questions here. Does the council keep that building? What purposes might it be used for? How does it fit into the surrounding area? If it has to be repaired or developed, well, how would that be done? And any other things that come up. So you might need to look again each time something like this comes up. Just check back with the vision. What does it say? Is it looking for particular facilities and services within that town centre? So you can actually put forward those. You might not have the final solution, but you might say, well, we have clear evidence here that the community is looking for this type of thing. There's a clear argument for a new community resource centre or an expanded library service. It's a precious building. It's part of our streetscape. We'd like to see it conserved, or at least have the outside conserved, because that's what's coming through from the vision. So there's lots of aspects to this, that you can see that you might bring to the discussion to inform what actually the decision is that's taken for that vacant council property. Okay. So you can search the overall vision. You can search in the digest by heading, okay, and you can see that there are things like, our long-term planning and the use of a built environment delivers environmental and social goods. based on this understanding, policy, education, funding across the community support us to actively protect our environment. So there are lots of different ways in which you could find yourself using the digest and the material from the different visions to communicate and to get the committee to think widely. Okay, so when you're practically applying the vision and using the digest, you can work two ways. You can either take the agenda, looking at the flip chart here, that's being set up by the committee that you're sitting on as a rep, or you can try and set the agenda by working from the vision. Okay, and it might be the overall vision, it might be issues that are common to all the municipal districts, or it might be for a particular area, so a particular municipal district. And you need to take that point and think, well, how would you search the vision for it? Okay, what would you look at first and why? So generally that would be keywords around the nature of the issue, right? And then what do you need to think about that's maybe beyond the obvious keywords, things that would be less common, but might be very relevant and give you some relevant information. And you might also then think also of situations where you might not be 100% confident of the PPN position on something because there's not enough detail there, or because the agenda item is very particular and you suspect that it might be a sensitive issue or something else. Well, in those situations, I'd say that's when you have to return to the membership. Now, whether that's through linkage groups or thematic networks, or just through putting a call out to member groups, maybe in the newsletter saying, there's an issue coming up, I would value feedback from all member groups interested in whatever it might be. In this, the last example we looked at, how we use empty spaces in the town. Okay, and in that way you can gather more information that you can use in terms of doing your job as a rep. If you're the one taking the agenda item, okay, so you might be saying, well, in the vision we're looking for, you know, better facilities for different aspects, different groups within the community in the town centre. You're still going to have to do a lot of this work because you're going to have to, if you like, flesh it out and explain what it is that you're looking for and ask the committee to think about this and the ways in which they could move to support it, to help see this delivered. So you still need to do the research of the documentation that's there. Okay. An example of that might be something about a challenge that a particular committee is looking at where they're identifying that there's not any integration, there's not, what you'd see as a positive involvement of members of new communities within a particular area. And you might look at how that would be referred to in the vision. So there might be phrases where new communities are used, and you could look for that in the indexing under each of the headings. But there could equally well be things like inclusion or diversity or participation. And you'd need to check out all of those headings in turn, okay, and the index, right? And then look on from those to the specific vision entries to see what's clearly being said by the members. And you pull together what you found. And as I indicated before, some of it will be directly relevant and some of it may be less direct, but nonetheless help you in terms of building the picture of the PPN's position on that issue. And then you have the confidence that you're not speaking just off the top of your own head as a rep, but you're really speaking with the backing of the PPN membership behind you. Okay. So as I've said, you don't need just to respond to the proposals and recommendations that are brought to you. You can be proactive. And when anything comes up, you know, we're asking ourselves, well, hang on, do I know what the local community needs in relation to this? And we can look at material for that. And you can ask those questions at committees, you know, okay, we're considering this. What information have we got, you know, on what the community needs are here? You know, is the committee thinking about making a decision without having enough information? If they have got information, how have they prioritized it? How do they know what their needs are and which are the most important? And how did they do that prioritization? You know, were the community involved in that prioritization? Do we maybe need some more information on either the options that we're being presented with, or in fact, are there other options that we might be bringing? Okay. And if all the issues that the PPN members are concerned about being considered that would relate to that particular topic. Okay. And I would remind you that the PPN has all of the original consultation inputs, and there may be more detail there, and you might find that that's useful. Okay, same as going back to linkage groups or thematic groups and asking members that have a particular interest, whether it's working with new communities and community resource centres, or it might be working with housing, whatever the issue happens to be. Okay, so use those resources and ask for further input if you need it as a rep. There are a number of other ways that we can use the PPN Vision. One of those is a gap analysis. So maybe when you look at the work that a committee is doing or something that the council has invested in, okay, we've spent a lot of money, putting street furniture in, let's say, and how does what we've done match up with what we were trying to do, what our objective was? And if it hasn't, what do we need to be doing differently? And from the PPN's perspective, what would the members like to see achieved? So how could that maybe be done differently in future to achieve their objectives? You also need to think about things like government timetables and schedules. When might be a new bit of legislation coming down the tracks, when are grant schemes going to open, and when are their deadlines, when is a new development plan or local area plans being developed, when is the new local economic and community plan being developed, and that will tend to influence how you mobilize, you activate the information from the vision and feed it in so that you can get the results that the community are looking for. You can also look at budget mapping and community development programs and the funds that are available, for example, under the local authorities' own budget streams. And as I've said, I just encourage you to think about, putting things on the agenda in the committees that you sit on. So you can anticipate, you can take the initiative, you can inform the other members at the committees that you're sitting on, and you can use all of the links within the PPN to support you. Okay. Remember, you have a really unique role at all of these structures in that you are there representing the community with a long-term view. You've got a really sort of visionary and strategic focus. All of our public agencies are meant to be working for the public good, but by necessity, they have a staff and a turnover of staff, and they have elected representatives who are also, there for set periods of time. Whereas when the PPN gets together to decide about things, it's thinking about the genuine bottom line, long-term future of the community. And you bring that aspect, that approach and that focus to the table when you sit on these committees. And that is really vital because it reminds everybody that that's what it's about. And yes, we have to, step through it, the work that we do every year and every, maybe 5 years in a strategic plan, but we need to remember where we're going and keep that in focus all of the time. So your role is really unique and very special on all of the committees that you're sitting on. Okay, so I guess lastly, I would say that you need to remember a few things. Using the vision is definitely an art and not a science, okay? But if you stay true to the spirit of the vision, you won't go far wrong, okay? It came from your member groups. It may not be perfect. And as it's looked at again, it may be fleshed out and become more comprehensive. And you won't necessarily find everything you need there. But it is a reflection of what all of your member groups came together and generated, and it has considerable weight and status because of that. Okay, the amount of material and the relevant material that you'll find in the vision and using the Vision Digest will depend on the issue. Okay, and whether it's there specifically or in detailed material or in a more general statement, for example, or a more general sentiment that we're looking for sustainable green energy sources within the county. So it might not say we want to move away from solid fuel heating systems, but that would be the thinking behind that. You can always go back and look for the more detailed inputs that were fed in at the consultation workshops, okay, and online when the visions were being developed. Just remember that those aren't necessarily supported by everybody, but it gives you the detail to inform you about, where this was coming from. And then also you can think about doing, if you like, additional homework insofar as the time allows, and I'm not suggesting that you're not already hard-pressed volunteers, But if there's something that's coming up as a particular issue and you might strengthen your position, then you can look at a few documents, and the PPN can direct you to the toolkit resource to see where you might get additional information. And you can steadily build a library of information that could be useful. Okay, so you can access that in order to make most use of the information and make the strongest argument for the community, whether it's the community together across County Kerry or whether it's for a particular municipal district. Okay, so that's you picking up your shield and your armor and taking that into battle. That's where your vision, the digest, and the sustainable development goals come in. They back you up, they inform you, and they give you real authority. When you get into a committee or any sort of board or structure that you're sitting on, they are the force behind your role and your presence there, and they give you a very strong, legitimate contribution to make. And I hope it goes well. Okay, thank you.